Welcome to Lecture 5 in this series of lectures where we are talking about raising your adolescent, how to meaningfully connect with your adolescent. In this lecture, we'll be talking about dealing with changes. You may recall that in our very first lecture, we pointed out 9 different changes that you may notice in your teenagers as they're growing up. And now we'll be talking about dealing with changes. But before we get there, I want to mention 3 areas where your teenager needs attention. The first is in the area of stability. The second is in the area of esteem. And the third is in the area of security. Now, in the whole area of stability, teenagers see threats in different places. They see threats at school, they see threats at home, they see threats among friends. What do I mean by threats? In the school situation, let's say, for example, your teenager has joined a new school. And as they join a new school, during the lecture time, everything is okay. But when they go out for break, people are in little clusters. People seem to know each other well. And your teenager is left hanging. Or perhaps they are not getting along with one of their best friends, and their best friend has left their little group to join someone else. There are threats in their relationships. Perhaps your teenager is being teased in school for their good moral values. Perhaps they're being teased because they are very bright academically, and instead of being admired, they're being ridiculed. So there are threats at the school level. There are threats at home. Perhaps parents are fighting. Perhaps there's sibling rivalry. Perhaps you've just moved a house. You've spent a lot of money and built a new home, and you've moved there. And your teenager is feeling threats because they have been disconnected from their friends. They're among new people. They don't really know how to connect. So threats in school, threats among friends, threats in the home are going on. Parents cannot always protect their teenagers from these emerging situations. You know, when the kids are young, you protect them. But as they get older, you let them grow and connect with the world and know how to protect themselves. And the teenager is frustrated and the parent is frustrated. But remember Proverbs 20 verse 5. The thoughts of a man are like deep waters, but a man of understanding can go in there and listen and scoop them out. Remember the 5 different levels of communication we talked about. So although this teenager is having challenges in stability, use the principles that we've talked about to this particular point. The fact that there may be disappointment in their lives, to connect with them. The second area is the whole area of esteem. And I won't talk much about it because we have a whole session that talks about self-esteem. But as the world changes and a child begins to suffer a crisis of identity, suffering because, as we mentioned in the previous lecture, the adult-sized body is demanding adult-sized behavior, but the teenager is struggling. You begin to notice struggles in their lives in the whole area of appearance and performance. We saw a little bit about this in that lecture when we talked about why children do what they do. So the whole area of esteem, their view of themselves is a big deal. You know, early in life, the class clown was made a lot of fun and got their way through. But now as a teenager, they're trying that approach and it's not working. We'll take a whole lecture and talk about esteem. The third area is the area of security. And I did mention something about security when we are talking about the 3 things that contribute to disappointment. Remember, we talked about unfailing love, we talked about significance, and we talked about security. But I want to bring another angle to it. And listen carefully as I expose you to Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 26. This proverb says, "Those who fear the Lord are secure, and He, the Lord, will be a refuge for their children." Did you hear that, parents? Those who fear the Lord, that means you and I, are secure. There's a stability and a security that God gives to those who fear him. But the Lord then gives a promise that he will be a refuge for their children. Children are born with an innate desire, an inborn desire for security. And parents are always the first level of security that children go to when they're in trouble. If that security fails, if that security is unavailable, children will create their own security. That peer pressure thing we talked about, that forming gangs that we talked about, that best friend situation we talked about, is all a form of looking for security. We talked about the need for parents to point their own children to Christ. Why is security and esteem and stability a big factor? There are several reasons. One is that a teenager's first memorable failure in relationship happens during this stage of life. A person's first memorable failure in relationships. You know, children have failure in relationships, but children are very forgiving. When you become a teenager and you have strained relationships, the memory of that is likely to linger on longer than if you are a child. And so this is happening, and the teenager doesn't know how to resolve it, and the parent is not available to help them think through it. And this is part of the reason why these three areas become a struggle. But there's also a second reason. Do you remember concrete and formal thinking? This is a stage of life where the transition between concrete and formal is taking place. The teenager is under pressure to think like an adult, but they are not an adult yet. They are thinking like an adult in some areas, but they are still thinking like children in other areas. And the frustration that's taking place is also the time when the young men are breaking their voices. And at one time they sound soprano, and another time a deep bass, and they're embarrassed about it. It's a time when the young ladies are developing their bust, and some of them develop a big bust at a very early age, and they walk in a hunch. Some of them are developing their bust very slowly and feeling left out by their peers, and they're going through pressure in their relationships. They're feeling very insecure. The third reason why they are affected is peer pressure and media. Now, peer pressure and media offer alternatives for these teenagers. They offer them drugs, they offer them sex, they offer them alcohol. But of course, the parents don't like those kind of approaches. And so the teenager thinks he's finding a solution to his issues, but the parents are forbidding them from tapping into this solution. So there is a tension between the teenager and the parent, because the parent is forbidding the only solution the teenagers found. And how are parents relating to the children during this stage? I'm going to share 3 approaches that parents take. The first one is to be a rescuer. A rescuer parent is always stepping in and rescuing their teenager from their challenges. And whenever the teenager does something wrong, they know, mom will be here and they'll bail me out. If you're a rescuer parent, you will soon have a very rebellious teenager, because they know you'll always step in and rescue them. The second approach that parents take is to be an adversary. Adversaries will always oppose what's going on. You show up in school, your child is accused of something, and you immediately side with the teacher without even finding out what really happened. Some children experience their parents as rescuers, some experience them as adversaries. And some of you parents listening to me, that's exactly how you experience your parents. But there is a third way, and this third way is the one that we want to promote. We want to be allies to our children. You want to be an ally. You want to stand with your child and walk through life with them, even though they may be in trouble. Your child is suspended from school, and you understand why they were suspended. You are not sitting there and screaming at them. You are walking through life with them. Here's a big question for you parents. What adjustments do you need to make to your life so that you can connect with your teenagers physically, emotionally, and be an ally with your teenager and not an adversary and not a rescuer? Teenagers need stability, they need to grow in esteem, and they need security. and you are the first line for these teenagers.